Sounds like a two-ding. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to the University Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Joey Cole, and it is my pleasure to be your service leader this morning. Before we begin our worship service, I'd like to invite up committee chairs or anyone who has announcements to make about the business of the church. And if you would come forward and use the microphone over here, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Marianne Feldheim, Social Action Committee. I want to welcome our speaker, Jerry Edwards from the ACLU. We are thrilled to have him. He spoke for the League of Women Voters of Seminole County, and he was fabulous. So I recommended him. He'll be great. We're also having our Social Action Committee meeting after. We are in the room next to the library. It's also on Zoom for those who would like to. I sent the link out. It was in the notable news. And lastly, we are still collecting for the UCF Knights Pantry, so please do bring things in. That's for the students, and there are a lot of students who really are in need of assistance. They've made the priority education over a lot of other things, and sometimes food is one they give up. So please think about that. Thank you.
Good morning, Lindsay Stroh from the Auction Committee. I want to thank everybody who's been donating interesting, fun stuff, and also those that have been going out to businesses. If you haven't already, that's the website to go to. You just Oh, okay. This one's better. virtualauction.bid/UUUF, and up at the top it says donate an item. That's where you would click. It would be helpful if you have a picture to go with it, to download the picture, because if you give me a photograph, I have to take it with my camera, and I'm not that good at it, so better to do it yourself. Also, the people that have gone out to businesses, I thank you so much. If you haven't already, there are forms back here. In case you don't want to do the computer thing, you can give it to me and I can get it on there. But we're getting a lot of nice donations. It's going to be a fun event. Thank you.
Good morning, Margie with membership. If you are new to our fellowship and haven't been to a UU 101 yet, please come on back. After services, I'll be back in the library. It's just a short get-together where we talk about Unitarian Universalism and a little bit about our congregation and how you can become a closer part of it. Thanks.
Well, good morning. It's a beautiful day to be here. I'm Kelly Buchanan, the marketing chair. A couple of social event announcements. The first one is that the Orlando Gay Chorus will be performing on March the 11th, this next month, at 8 p.m. at First Church and the Milk District Salon. Tickets are $20 each. You can go to our Facebook page. You'll see the link there, and you can purchase your ticket there. Let me know if you're interested, because we're going to try to get a group of folks from our congregation maybe to meet up for dinner at around 6, maybe a drink or two, before we head over to First Church for the event. So mark your calendars, March the 11th. The second social event that we have is David Williams, who's spoken here before with the Central Florida Free Thought community. We've reached out to kind of partnership with a hike, which will be next Saturday. That hike will be at the, so we're organizing a hike with our congregation. Families, children are all invited.
How long?
The event will be at the Little Big Econ Trail in Oviedo. The hike is 4 miles. However, you don't have to hike the 4 miles, right? Because at 11 o'clock after the hike, I plan on trying to get a lot of us together to do a little picnic. So if you only can walk a half a mile or a mile, walk in, walk out, meet us at 11 o'clock there at the picnic tables for a picnic. So you can bring yours, Roy, but I'm sorry. But just do whatever you can do, and I think the goal here is just to get outside, right, during this time. Okay, my final announcement is that a part of the marketing committee, part of our goal, our roadmap this year was to reach out and partner more with UCF. And I think that we've done a really, just a fantastic job doing that. But this quarter, we actually got on their, what's called their student resource magnet. So all new students that start UCF get a magnet, I guess an orientation magnet that goes on the refrigerator. And so we actually got on the magnet as the only congregation. So I'm going to pass this around so you can kind of take a look at it, and then I'll pick these up in the back. And the last thing I have to say is the marketing committee is having not our first, but the first in a long time meeting. And if you're interested, if you just have some feedback for us, we'd love to hear your voice. Let me know. I'll add you to the distribution, and we'd love to have you. Thanks.
John Mowbray on behalf of Facilities and Grounds, and I want to thank the Facilities Committee, because there were only about 3 of us that showed up yesterday for work day, but Dave Simons being one, Derek Catlin, and myself, and then Dee Covert came out and helped for a while, then had a little bit of a hand injury. So keep her in your thoughts and prayers during joys and concerns. But if you want to see the 8th wonder of the world, you won't believe the design that Derek made out back for the play set. So if you have time, check it out. But the third Saturday of every month is facilities or work days. So please come out and help when you can. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for always getting people excited about that and being there. I did have a good excuse, and I got approved to be absent in advance from John, so normally I'm there too. I'm here on behalf of Reverend Tracy at the moment. She said another fake email has been going out that appears that it's from her, but if you hover over the name, you'll see that it's not her email address. You know how they highlight, so somebody has hijacked it again, and rest assured that Reverend Tracy would never ask anyone for money in that format. She would come to the board and say, look, I need a raise. So please ignore any emails like that from Reverend Tracy, and hopefully they'll go away shortly. And the other is, as president of your board, our quarterly meeting is next Sunday. We've been telling you every week for months, well, at least 3 weeks since we planned it. So please be here. We've got a lot to share. As you can see, there's a whole bunch going on, so your board's been even working on more stuff, and we'll share all that next week, so we hope you all will stay after service and talk about it with us.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beatrice Reyes-Foster. This is Crystal Bechtold, and this is Miles. So we are happy to announce that we are organizing a band book club for teens. And right now we're really trying to make it kind of word of mouth. We're not going to advertise it too widely because we need to keep the group manageable. But if anyone here knows of an interested teen, please let us know, and we will happily share more information.
Great. Just hand it to us.
Sorry. That's all right. Yeah, thank you. By the way, on emails, a lot of times they'll have a junk or a phishing thing on the email. This has nothing to do with that. I just wanted, because we work for an organization that says, phishing or junk or whatever. So anyway, you can do that. Anyway, I'm David McElroy. Tomorrow night is the men's support group here, 6:30. It is potluck or bring your own, and love to see all of you there, men. Anyway, that's tomorrow night at 6:30 here. Thank you.
Large boys, too?
What's that?
Large boys?
Large boys. Well, yeah.
And I'd like to thank everyone who brought in shoes this morning for the Pathlight Homes. I only gave you 1 week but a lot of people did bring me shoes, so thank you for that. We have a lot to deliver tomorrow to Pathlight Homes. And I'm contributing, I have $50, and if anybody wants to add to that, I'll be happy to take your money after service. Okay. For those that may not know, Pathlight Homes provides homes for the chronically homeless. They have 2 facilities, Maxwell Terrace and Maxwell Gardens, and they are, one's on Colonial, West Colonial, and the other one is on John Young, I think. Oh, no, OBT, okay. So at any rate, we did bingos down there 2 summers ago, I guess. Okay. Yeah, that was fun. I missed my calling as a bingo caller. I thought I did great. Okay, let me see, opening words. I got those. My opening words today come from this Voices from the Margins book that I got at Susie a few years ago. And it's entitled Social Justice by Donald E. Robinson. Many people use the term social justice in self-serving ways. What they mean by social justice is just us. But social justice can only begin with the interaction between fortunate people and those who are disadvantaged. It is incumbent upon those who, by virtue of the accident of birth or other circumstances, have good jobs, good education, good lives, to come to the assistance of those who face formidable obstacles to getting an education and leading fulfilling lives. Social justice insists that people are not their circumstances, they are their possibilities. Social justice demands that all people, regardless of their birth circumstances, are entitled to a fair chance at life, that every person has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And now, I believe we're going to have our opening music. Is that right? My absolute favorite, and I suggested this one for this service, so I'm thrilled that our own Marilyn McGinnis is going to be up here singing it.
Oh, thank you. I suggest you look up the Al Green version online. It's absolutely amazing, as well as the Sam Cooke version. I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know that change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Now I go to the movies and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me, don't you be hanging around. It's been a long time coming, but I know that change, it's gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Then I go to my brother and I I say, brother, brother, won't you help me, please? Yeah, but he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. There've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long. Oh, but now I know I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know that change is gonna come. Oh, yes it will, yes it will, yes it will.
Wow. All right. If I didn't mention, that song was written by Sam Cooke, one of my favorites. Okay, great. All right, we have opening music. It's time for lighting the chalice. And our chalice lighter this morning is Uriah. And he wants me to tell you, he uses he and him. He is 8. And he just got 2 Aikido fighting toys. If you'll join me in the reciting, in the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. And now, if you'll join me and think of these words, we say this all the time, but they're particularly important today. Our affirmation: love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. Okay, at this point I'd like to welcome any guests that may be here. If this is your first time, or if this is your 101st time, we are glad that you're here with us. If you carry the weight of a weary world on your shoulders, or you entered the doors with a song in your heart and a skip in your step, we're glad you're here. If you are the loudest voice in the town square, or the subtle hand behind the scenes, we're glad you're here. If you have failed once or 1,000 times, we are glad you're here. If you sing like angels or mumble behind the hymnal, we're glad you're here. This community is what it is because of your presence. So welcome into this space of love, support, compassion, fellowship, and worship. We're really glad you're here. And now we will have really an important part of our service every week, and that is our joys and concerns. It's as a welcoming community, we find this is connection. It's a spiritual community. We find meaning. Our joys are amplified when we share them, and our sorrows are lessened. So if you have something that you would like to share, and before everybody gets up here, I would just like to share my joy in the fact that Peter and Billy did an outstanding job at coffee this morning. Thank you so much. And I'm really impressed that Billy has volunteered for this and has done just a great job. It's nice to see our youth getting involved as well. Chase, you want to come up?
I rode my bike this weekend with my dad.
Oh,
I went up
wonderful.
to the hill.
Great.
Hi, I'm Peter. When I'm not working in there, I am the primary teacher for the Orlando Insight Meditation Group. And I have been absent for the last couple of weeks because we had our biggest and best retreat a couple weeks ago. Brought in a teacher who's internationally known, Shyla Catherine, led a wonderful mindfulness meditation retreat. It was a big success at San Pedro Spiritual Development Center. And very powerful retreat experience for me. So I'm very, very grateful for my decades of meditation practice. I wish you well.
Hi, I'm Chloe McElroy. I foolishly joined a list on Facebook that's called like Last Chance Dog Rescue, which was basically a list, a group, a Facebook group that basically shows like local shelter dogs that are basically on death row. And on Valentine's Day, there was 4 of them that were on death row, and they were taking pledges and other things. But basically, these 2 dogs were about to be put to sleep if they didn't get a foster. So foolishly, I said I'd foster, and I actually ended up saving a life, which actually felt really, really beneficial. And I picked up Cindy Lou from the shelter. She was a really pretty 2-year-old pit bull, just so sweet, and actually had damaged her tail because she was wagging it so much in the kennel that she had hurt it. So literally I had to keep wrapping her tail up because there was flecks of blood everywhere from her being so happy. But luckily she got an adopter in Atlanta, and a whole group of people worked together to get her picked up from my house this morning, and she's on her way to Atlanta now. But if you have the chance to foster, do it, especially with the shelter systems that are kill shelters, because millions of dogs and cats and other animals are put down every day, and it's so sad. Don't join a Facebook group that says Last Chance Shelter, though, because you will absolutely feel like you need to save every one of those babies. But do, if you have the chance to open your home to a foster, instead of letting them get euthanized, do it. And if you're not able to keep an animal, please do research of where it's not a kill shelter, because kill shelters, they don't have enough space and they just go through dogs and cats like crazy. So just do your research, be a responsible pet owner, and I'm glad that Cindy Lou is alive.
So I'm Melanie. So you may remember that our son in November broke his arm. So he is fully healed. He got the full clearance the other day. And he also celebrated a birthday. So I had two great things from this week.
Yes. Hello, I'm Livy, and I have 2 joys. My first joy is that I think last week we had a Valentine's dance at my school. There was games, food. Sadly, the cotton candy machine was broken. And yes, it was. I'm trying to cause drama. And my second joy is that on a Tuesday, when it was Valentine's Day, we had something called Game Day, is where we go to different classrooms and do different activities. Like, for example, like dominoes or dancing, yeah. And that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Annika Leader, and before this day we went to the trampoline with my friends, Girl Rowan. Thank you.
That sounds like fun.
Hi, I'm Finn, and same thing like Annie. Same thing like Annie.
Margie again. So, my second son is launched. High five, Margie. He's 34, I think. So, don't ever give up hope.
These are the toys I got.
Oh, your support. Okay. Okay. Again, good morning. Kelly Buchanan. I have a joy and a concern, and really this should have been committee moments, but the joy is that the book that we're reading right now in our congregational book club, we have one of those, so if you're new, if you're interested, we do have a book club here. The joy is we'll be ending this particular book, which is an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. And there's really no concern except for we just kind of went right to the conclusion. And so the concern is that this Tuesday is our last meeting or book meeting for this particular book. So if you have a recommendation for the next book, or if you'd like to lead or facilitate the book club, come and see me. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is James. I'm traveling from Haiti, and it's an honor for me to be here. And thank you for welcoming me into your home in your church. And thank you for Martha for having me, invite me here today. So I'm really grateful for this week, because I just completed a project that I had admired for like 3 years now. It's a water pump, solar water pump that I could provide water to people in my community. So this week I finally completed with the support of so many entities, especially like the Rotary Club in Avalon and UGO, and also my uncle would donate the last pieces, which is a water tank. Now people in my community can have water 24/7, because once the sun is out, water just pumped from the well, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you.
I'm having my birthday party at Down, so I love my mom.
Now you know what's going on in our church. All right, if we could just take a moment to think on those joys and concerns that were shared and those that may be going unshared this morning. Just a moment of silence. Now, if we could come back, and I don't know who is doing Time for All Ages today. Do we have a reader this morning? We do not. Then I have a great story to share. I do. I have a list of UU humor. And the one I saw that I wanted to share, what do you think? Carrie, this is okay, right? Okay. All right. There were three little kindergarten kids, and the first kid says, "I'm Catholic, and our symbol is the cross." And the second little kid says, "Well, I'm Jewish, and our symbol is the Star of David." And the third little kid said, "Well, I'm a Unitarian, Universalist, and our symbol is actually a candle in a cocktail glass." Our flaming chalice. That's Time for All Ages. And now we'll move to our interlude and offering. We are a very generous organization, please, if you can give. We are still, part of our collection goes to the ACLU, who will be speaking with us this morning. And the children will help us in collecting the money.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to sing this morning, Lift Every Voice and Sing. In the hymn books that are in the chairs, it's number 149. I'll sing the first verse, and then I invite you to join me on the second and the third verses, okay? But just for some information on this hymn, the words of this familiar hymn were written by James Weldon Johnson. He earned 2 degrees from Atlanta University and became a public school teacher and principal in Jacksonville, Florida. He wrote this text for a celebration commemorating Abraham Lincoln's birthday on February 12th. And it was performed then, first of all, by school children. He was a multi-talented poet, a lawyer, and a diplomat, and he served as the first National Executive Secretary of the NAACP. And this anthem became the organization's official song. He also founded the first African-American newspaper called the Daily American. The music for this song were written by his brother, John Rosamond Johnson, and he was educated at the New England Conservatory of Music and studied further in Europe. And then from 1896 until 1908, he served as a supervisor of music for the public school system in Jacksonville, Florida. So lift every voice and sing. You can't do that sitting down, okay? So everybody up. I'll sing the first verse and you join me on the second and the third, please. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to this place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading the path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of a bright star is cast. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might lead us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places our God where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you all.
That's one of the best we've ever done, I got to tell you. And if that sounds familiar, you were probably watching the Super Bowl last week. That was, to me, the best part of the whole time, the whole Super Bowl. But at any rate, okay. It is time for the children to leave and go to their activities. And can you sing with me? We love you and bless you and send you on your way. We love you and bless you today and every day. I am just filled with pleasures this morning. It is my pleasure to welcome Jerry Edwards, who joined the ACLU of Florida in July of 2021 as a staff attorney focusing on criminal justice issues. He's a Florida native who left the state to earn a degree in sport and entertainment management from the University of South Carolina and then returned to attend the University of Florida Levin College of Law. After law school, Jerry worked as a judicial law clerk for Judge David C. Guadarrama, I think I'm saying that right, of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas, and Eugene L. Seiler, Jr. of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. After completing his clerkships, Jerry served as an assistant solicitor general for the Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt. In that role, Jerry received amicus and litigation opportunities, offered input on executive policy, and successfully defended the state of Kansas in numerous civil matters, including a constitutional challenge to Kansas's Emergency Management Act. Jerry is excited to be back home in Florida and helping to safeguard civil liberties of Floridians. And without further ado, please. He's also agreed to stay after for questions if you have them.
Thank you for that. Are y'all hearing me okay? Yeah. All right, great. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak here today. I appreciate y'all's kindness and generosity. I know the ACLU appreciates the support. I'm a bit long-winded, so hopefully we will have some time for Q&A, but afterwards I will stay and answer any questions you have, as Joey said. So Joey's given kind of a long introduction of my career, and I just will say, thus, due to the state's recent actions, my practice has expanded into a lot of free speech work as well. So criminal justice and free speech are really my focus right now. Unfortunately, I always say it would be better if my job didn't exist because the government respected everybody's rights, but unfortunately right now I have a lot of job security. So, yeah. I'm very happy to hear about all the joys today. Unfortunately, my presentation will cover plenty of concerns, but I do promise that I will try to end with an uplifting message. So a little bit of background on the ACLU. It was founded in 1920 by a group of concerned citizens, including people like Helen Keller and future Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter. It's an organization that exists to safeguard American civil liberties. The ACLU of Florida, which is my employer, it was founded in 1965 by a group of Floridians. We have our headquarters in Miami, Florida, and offices throughout the state, including here in Orlando. Right now, we have 11 attorneys. We are currently working on hiring an attorney who will focus on LGBTQ rights issues. And we have 3 affirmative campaigns. And really what that means is these are issues that we are focused on making progress in the law. And so what that means is, I'm sure y'all have heard of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so Justice Ginsburg led the ACLU's Women's Rights Project as a young attorney. And really her goal was to change the law in a way to protect women from discrimination. And so she was trying to make progress on rights, not just protect the rights that already existed, basically expand civil liberties. And so that's what our campaign model seeks to do. Right now, things are in a little bit of flux because we have a new executive director and the state government has been very aggressive in targeting civil liberties. And so our 3 campaigns are voting rights, immigrants' rights, and criminal justice reform. And these, again, are campaigns where we're trying to make progress, not just protect our existing rights, but create new rights, expand civil liberties. Unfortunately, some of that focus on that work has been taken away by recent legislation and actions coming out of Tallahassee. And so that also speaks to our second focus as an organization, at least on the legal side of things, and that's defensive litigation. And I don't mean that we are defending a person or defending the government. Rather, we are defending rights. And so when the government passes a new law that says you can't speak about X, we would come in and we would try to prevent that law from being enforced to protect people's free speech rights from being eroded. And so that really is the 2 focuses of our organization. 1, affirmative, where we're trying to establish new rights or expand civil liberties, and 2, defensive, where we're trying to protect the rights we already have from being eroded by our government. So I'm going to talk a bit about the work we're doing today. Obviously, I cannot cover everything we do because that would take hours, especially with how long-winded I am. So I think the first focus I will have is on free speech, racial justice, and LGBTQ rights. And I'll talk about a few cases and also talk about a few issues that we are working on, including, as y'all have established a banned book club, we are also looking into banned books and seeking to figure out what we can do in that area to improve things right now. Thank you. So our first case, this is a point of pride for me as I am the organization's lead attorney on it, is Purnell v. Florida Board of Governors. And that case is a constitutional challenge to the Stop Woke Act. And what is the Stop Woke Act? It is a delightful piece of law that our legislator passed last year that seeks to prevent discussions of race and gender and sex in schools, including our public universities, as well as in businesses offering DEI trainings. And so really, I'm sorry? Diversity, equity, inclusion. Sorry. I get going pretty fast, and sometimes I'm not recalling that not everyone's familiar with all the acronyms we use. So, with the Stop Woke Act, the way it's written is it's written in a way to make it seem like it's targeting discrimination. And so it's written in saying you're not allowed to say things like a certain race is morally superior than another race, for example. Or you're not allowed to say that we cannot treat people, without regard for race. But what these laws are is they're basically a wolf in sheep's clothing. And what they're seeking to do is to prevent people from discussing, our sins of our past and the problems we have existing in society now. For example, the concept of white privilege. You cannot talk about it in education under this law. You can't speak about affirmative action. You can't argue that we need affirmative action. You're certainly allowed to argue that we don't need affirmative action, though. Don't worry, our government made sure you can make that argument. You can argue that white privilege doesn't exist, but you can't argue that white privilege does exist. So yeah, it's a very, very bad piece of legislation. And so we filed a lawsuit on behalf of a number of professors, including a couple professors at UCF and a professor who teaches at the law school here, the Florida A&M University Law School here in Orlando. And I am glad to say that we were successful, at least so far. Back in November, a judge in Tallahassee granted us an injunction. And what an injunction does is it says to all of the government officials who are involved in the case, you're not allowed to enforce this law. And so because of that injunction, the Stop Woke Act cannot be enforced in higher education, in our public universities and colleges. Now that case is on appeal, and we're going to have to wait and see what the appellate court does. That's going to be a longer process, but as of now, it's not being enforced in our public colleges and universities, so some good news. In addition to that case, we've also brought a case challenging depending on your political persuasion, we call the anti-protest law, and the other side calls the anti-riot law that was passed a couple years ago. And our interpretation of this law is if you are at a protest and say somebody 100 yards from you gets in a fight with a group of people, the police could arrest every single person at the protest under this rioting law and charge you with rioting. And so it's a very pernicious law aimed at preventing people from protesting. And so us, along with a coalition, have sued over that, and we were able to get an injunction as well to stop that from being enforced. So more good news. And the appellate court thus far has upheld it. It sent the case to the Florida Supreme Court for them to try to narrow this law so that it is constitutional. So right now the case is pending before the Florida Supreme Court. They'll have a chance to try to rewrite the law so that it doesn't violate people's rights to protest. The final lawsuit I'm going to talk about, and this is not an ACLU of Florida or an ACLU lawsuit. Thus far, we've kind of sat it out and watched to see what happened. And the two cases already filed is related to the Don't Say Gay law, or the other side would disagree. They'd call it the Parental Rights and Education law. And I should note that the ACLU is a nonpartisan organization, so if I unintentionally say something political, that is my personal view and not the ACLU's view. So the Don't Say Gay laws, they basically prevent those in K through 12 education from discussing issues dealing with sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. And in K through 3, it's completely barred. From 4th through 12, it is supposed to be age appropriate. Now, unfortunately, because that's such a vague concept, most teachers don't want to risk being fired or having their teaching license taken from them, so they stay away from those issues entirely, including just being able to discuss it with their students. So it's a very unfortunate law, and it harms the LGBTQ students in our educational institutions. So 2 groups have filed lawsuits. And unfortunately, one of them has not been successful. It was recently dismissed. The other lawsuit's still pending. We at the ACLU are keeping an eye on how these go, and if the other lawsuit's unsuccessful, we're going to try to see if there's a way for us to intervene and maybe find a way forward. But bad news on that. That law is still being enforced in our schools. There are a few active investigations we have, and what does investigation mean? It means we are currently looking at the issue, talking to people on the ground who are dealing with this problem and trying to determine how best to solve it, whether that's litigation, whether that's advocacy, whether litigation is even a possibility. And so some of the issues we're looking at right now related to free speech, LGBTQ rights, and racial justice are the transgender healthcare ban, and that's currently being voted on by the Florida Medical Board. They haven't issued a final rule yet that's gone into effect, but once that happens, I would anticipate that we are going to be pretty aggressively fighting that because it bans gender-affirming care for people who are under 18 and transgender, and it's very unfortunate that people. Basically, gender-affirming care is shown through numerous studies to reduce the likelihood that transgender youth commit suicide, and so this is a really harmful government action being taken by our state government in Tallahassee. We're also looking into the recent punitive behavior towards businesses that had drag shows. They've targeted their liquor licenses. The AP African American Studies course, we are looking deeply into that and very aggressively considering our options on how to push back against the government for blocking that from being taught in our schools. And even more generally, the Stop Woke Act, while we've stopped it in higher education, it's still in effect in K through 12. And so this is related to the Stop Woke Act, so we're still trying to figure out the best way to attack it in K through 12. To not go too deeply into the weeds and bore you, higher education professors have more robust First Amendment free speech rights than K through 12 teachers, and so you have to be very careful in bringing K through 12 cases, or else you risk making bad law. And so we've been deliberate in trying to figure out a way to combat this law, and we're still considering our options. I think this one will make you happy. As I said before, book bans. We are looking into book bans. We have been very bothered by what we've seen throughout the state, where books about people like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Roberto Clemente have been taken off the shelves and even rejected. It's baffling that you could have a civil rights leader and not be able to teach about their life. So there have been, schools in, for example, Duval County, where we've seen just out of fear of this new law that deals with school libraries, have just removed an overwhelming number of their books from the libraries, and you just see empty shelves. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Other districts have been better about it, have had a process where people can challenge it, but they've tried to keep books on the shelves. So we've been happier with the districts who have been less aggressive in removing books, but we're still trying to figure out, what exactly is happening throughout the state on that, just because each district is treating it differently. And the final two active investigations related to free speech right now are the attacks on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and really that's at most colleges and universities throughout the state. It's a program that tries to find ways to make college life easier from people whose backgrounds aren't, from different backgrounds, I guess would be the way to put it. That includes people who are first-generation college students, that includes people of color, that includes people in the LGBTQ community, also veterans. It's a very broad program. Our state is talking about defunding it, and so we have to wait and see what happens there and see exactly the decision our state government makes. Finally, New College of Florida, our our governor recently appointed a very extreme board of trustees to New College of Florida, who's going to try to radically change how the school is. And so we're seeing what can be done to slow them down, what can be done to stop them. But right now, the students and faculty are very much concerned, and we've heard rumors that a lot of people are considering leaving the university, which is very sad. So on that uplifting note, I will move on to voting rights, and I do have some good news here. So also have bad news, but we'll focus on the good news first. So we filed a lawsuit in Jacksonville challenging their local maps because their local maps discriminated against black voters. Basically what the city council and school board did there is they said, we want to have X percentage of black voters in these districts, and so they packed as many as they could in a few number of districts with very weird looking maps, and then in the parts of town that are predominantly white, they had these very normal looking districts, and so it was quite clear that they were trying to reduce the number of districts that black voters had a say in, and so we filed a lawsuit challenging those maps. We were successful in getting them struck down, and the judge granted us new maps, and there will be elections in March under those new maps that are not unconstitutionally and racially gerrymandered. So good news there, and we also filed a lawsuit in Miami. Yes, I mean, good. We're always happy for good news. So we also filed a lawsuit in Miami, and we're seeking to do the same thing there, where they've done much of the same with voters of color, have packed them into a certain number of districts. That case is still in the beginning stages, and so we haven't gotten a ruling for the judge yet. Maybe in less positive news, Amendment 4, which passed back in 2018, that was what gave felons their right to vote back. After that, the state enacted legislation that said if you haven't paid all your fines and fees, you can't vote. And then we've seen some of these voting prosecutions targeted at voters they told, yes, you can vote, and then later on decided, oh, wait, you actually still owe money, so you can't vote, after these people had already voted, and then went and arrested them. And so we are considering a voter intimidation lawsuit under federal law. There's a lot of protections under federal law, including the Ku Klux Klan Act, which ironically would potentially offer a way to sue the government for discriminating against these voters. That still is kind of in the investigatory stage. We're still reaching out, talking to people, getting a feel for what happened there. But we are prepared to push back, especially after the way the legislator undermined the voters' intent on enacting that constitutional amendment. Finally, and this is not uplifting, the Supreme Court is considering two very significant cases and actually had oral argument in the fall. I expect we'll get a decision sometime between now and June. I know that's a broad window. Usually they wait until May or June for the most controversial decisions, but it's possible they decide them earlier. The two cases are Merrill v. Milligan and Moore v. Harper. And so I'll start with Moore v. Harper because it is, well, they're both very bad, but arguably the worst one. In that case, the Republican Party of North Carolina is arguing under the independent state legislator doctrine, and that is the doctrine that our former president tried to argue allowed him to overturn the election, that the gerrymandered maps they put together in their North Carolina Supreme Court struck down for being unconstitutional under the North Carolina Constitution. It should override what the state has said. And the significance of this case is, while I am doubtful that the Supreme Court will go to the maximum extent and say that the legislator can overturn, state legislators can overturn elections they don't like. I doubt that happens. The upshot of it is that it could result in all statewide protections for gerrymandering going away. And that's significant here in Florida because we have the Fair District Amendments that protect Floridians from severely gerrymandered maps, although we have to see if the courts are going to enforce them. As recently there's a pretty gerrymandered map passed by our legislator and governor, and thus far it's still working its way through the court system, the challenges to it. The second case is a case called Merrill v. Milligan, also in the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's a challenge to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. In that case, black plaintiffs in Alabama filed a lawsuit because the maps passed by the legislator, and yes, this is also a gerrymandering case. For those who are unaware, because I know I'm using the term gerrymandering and assuming people know what it means, I should probably have defined it. What gerrymandering is when a legislator passes new maps that lays out districts for representatives and senators and congressional representatives. It means that they draw their districts in such a way to disenfranchise certain groups. Basically, if you are a legislator in a democratically controlled state, you might draw your maps in a way so that Republicans don't have the ability to elect a majority in the state house unless they win like 70% of the vote. Or in the case of Wisconsin, I think Democrats won about 54% of the vote a few years ago, and because of how gerrymandered the maps were, the Republicans won about 60% of the legislative seats. So it basically prevents voters from being able to choose their representatives. Instead, the representatives choose their voters. It's very harmful to our democracy. But Section 2 under the Voting Rights Act has been one of the most potent defenses against gerrymandering, at least on racial levels. And it was passed in 1965 because the southern states were denying black people representation. And so, in Alabama, you might have 20% of the population was black, but then 100% of the seats were controlled by white people. And so what this does is it basically says you're not allowed to dilute representation based off of race. And that includes, any group, any people of color, or even, white people. But it looks like the Supreme Court is likely to either overturn it or make it nearly impossible to enforce. And the upshot of that is recently in Florida, under our new gerrymandered maps, a district in northeast Florida in the Jacksonville area was a district where the large black population in Jacksonville could elect a congressional representative of their choice. And really what happened under the new maps is they had this kind of almost square, rectangular district. The new maps broke this rectangular district up into 4 or 5 other districts that are now overwhelmingly majority white, and instead of having a district where black people can elect a representative of their choice, we now have 5 districts where white people control basically who gets elected. And so the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, would have prevented that, but because the Supreme Court is now considering what to do about it, it's questionable if that's a tool we will be able to use moving forward. And so if the Supreme Court does what's expected, it'll allow states throughout the country, but especially in the South, to dilute black representation especially, but also Hispanic representation, Asian representation, all sorts of people of color groups. It's very unfortunate. I'm hoping that the Supreme Court will do the right thing, but we now have a Supreme Court that leans very strongly in one direction, and I think based off of their rulings recently, I'm not sure that they will. So that's kind of the bad news here. And I will now move on to reproductive rights. More bad news. So, yeah, but maybe not totally bad news. So as I'm sure many of you are aware, a case called Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health Organization recently overturned Roe v. Wade, which was the case from 1973 that protected a woman's right to choose. There are certainly groups that are very happy about that. There are groups who are not happy about that. We at the ACLU are not happy about that, as we believe that women should have the ability to control their own bodies. But currently we have a lawsuit challenging Florida's 15-week abortion ban that was passed knowing the Supreme Court was likely to rule that way. And that's now in the Florida Supreme Court. The good news here in Florida is that we do have a constitutional right to privacy under the state constitution that was passed in the wake of Roe v. Wade and was supposed to incorporate those protections. The bad news is that the Florida Supreme Court is now majority justices appointed by our current governor. And so the question is, will they interpret the constitutional amendment as protecting abortion rights? That is unclear. I'm hoping they will, but the cynic in me doesn't know that they will. But there is good news, and that's if they do overrule prior precedent that protects reproductive rights in Florida along the grounds of Roe, we do have citizen ballot initiatives that we can pursue, and there's a possibility that there will be a citizens ballot initiative in 2024 seeking to protect reproductive rights and put Roe v. Wade explicitly in the Florida Constitution. That's still up in the air, but if the Supreme Court does overrule its prior precedent, the Florida Supreme Court, I would expect that probably happens. So, with all that good news, I do want to try to leave you with something uplifting. And so, I don't want you to come out of here thinking we're powerless. The courts are against us, the state government's against us. There's nothing we can do. That's what the people who are in power right now want us to think. And so, you still have the power, especially in local elections and in even statewide elections. And it's important to turn out and vote, to write your legislator, to stay in contact, because there are ways to deter people from taking the worst actions. And sometimes that's just settling for a law that's merely not good instead of a law that's terrible. But with constituents' input, you do affect the legislative process. And so, my call to you is, whatever your political ideology, just stay involved, continue protesting to the extent you're comfortable, continue voting, continue speaking up when you see something wrong, and reach out to your legislators, write them, tell them what you think, oppose laws, stay on top of what's happening in the legislative process. We are blessed to have very good reporting here in Florida, and so they're generally quite effective at getting out the news of what's happening in the legislature. And I will say, on a final note, one of my clients in the Stop Woke Act litigation, Dr. Marvin Dunn, is an older black man who grew up during segregation, during Jim Crow. This is a man who served his country honorably in the Navy and then came home and was told at the University of Florida that he could not attend on account of his race. His state's flagship university could not attend on account of his race. And yet, Dr. Dunn recently said in an interview that he is still optimistic for the future and he thinks what's happening now is just a passing phase. We've made a lot of progress. We're going to continue to make progress. This is a mere temporary setback. If a man who has lived through everything that he has, who has faced everything that he has, can be that optimistic about the future, then what excuse do I have? I am also optimistic about the future. This is a temporary setback. It's a passing phase, and things are going to get better. So, yes, thank you. So I'm very happy to see all the joys today. I know added a few concerns, but I'm also, at this point, if I haven't used up all my time, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I see 4 hands up. We're going to go with four questions.
First of all, I will stand up and give you that much respect because I have a great deal of it, so thank you very much. I have been a big mouth about politics since 1980, where I feel we went downhill from there. And the last 25 years, I have been an overly big mouth around in this congregation and have gotten a whole lot of people, finally, who didn't say I am just not political when I tell them constantly, if you're not political, you're not controlling your life because politics is there. So thank you for that. You also answered my first question, which was about the Northeast District there, that I wondered what the case was, because I'm wondering, since we basically lost that district in the last election, that was just horrible. And lastly, in your own position, when we were going to give a donation from this church to the ACLU, I picked up that the only place we could send money to, basically, was down at the Miami's office. Now, there used to be, we're in Central Florida with Seminole and Orange County, there used to be in Central Florida an ACLU group that was largely volunteer people, and then what I was told was all of those volunteer organizations are now being, quote, reconstructed. I have no idea what that meant, but it's a good word. Anyway, it turns out that we don't have any local representation anymore. Yesterday, I attended a Seminole County Democratic meeting, and people are very interested in this, and what is the reconstruction program, and why isn't it such that we would have a volunteer group of ACLU here? And I'd have done more things, but I'll let someone else have a turn.
Thank you for your great questions and your kind words. So I can't talk too much about the ins and outs of that. There's an entire process going on between ACLU's national office and the ACLU of Florida State affiliate here that's working on this reconstruction, and unfortunately I'm not privy to those conversations. They're above my pay grade. I do know that the organization is working to restart the volunteer network and try to keep local ties. The problem is that during the last election, the ACLU of Florida has a number of different departments. I'm in their legal department. We also have a field department that handles organizing and also volunteer outreach, along with statewide initiatives that also does volunteer outreach. Unfortunately, a lot of our field department departed to work with political campaigns, and because the election was happening, we basically outsourced to temporary employees. Because our director was leaving. And so at this point, we're still putting back together our field department. So I think there is going to be a lot of effort to put back together the volunteer networks. As for what's going to happen with the local organizations, which we've typically referred to as chapters, I can't say. I'm not sure. That's something that our executive director knows, but it's above my pay grade.
Hey, Jerry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's really timely, right? This talk today, so thank you. And thanks for the good fight. I kind of have like an observation, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, but it feels like the frequency and variety of attacks against civil liberties have dramatically increased. And it feels like what you're doing is fighting brush fires. They can pop up anytime, anywhere, all the time, right? And so you kind of got to ask yourself, what's the root cause? So one, is my observation right that the frequency and variety of attacks has increased? And two, what happened? Why did that happen? Big hard questions, yeah? Okay.
They are very hard questions. So I would say that I think it ebbs and flows. And in recent history, yes, we're definitely seeing a rise in attacks on civil liberties. I think if we were talking about 70 years ago, people would say, well, we had Jim Crow and segregation at that point, so there was even stronger attacks. But you're right. I mean, if you look at the early 2000s to mid 2000s, things definitely did not seem to be this bad. Although I was, in that point I was in high school, and so maybe they were. But yes, I do think you're right that they've escalated. As to why, I think it has to do with politics, and I think it has to do with partisan polarization, and unfortunately with a recent turn in a certain party. I don't want to lay all the blame, though, at that one party's feet, because both parties do engage in behavior that's unconstitutional, and we have certainly sued both parties in recent year. But right now in Florida, there's definitely one offender that's worse than the other, right now at least. Yeah, I've tried to be nonpartisan here. So exactly why that's happening, I think part of it is political polarization. I think part of it is a change in the ideology of the party that's governing, from maybe a party that used to at least claim they valued limited government, and to a party that now seems to value punishing their opposition, would be the way I put it.
Oh, thank you so much for being here and informing us and giving us some hope. There was an Orlando Sentinel report that came out a few years ago, which I'm sure you're probably aware that there's like 150 or 170 religious schools that are discriminating, but also taking state funds that would kick out LGBTQ students, or if you admitted that you were a teacher or a staff member, or they wouldn't enroll them. So I've contacted, I wanted to ask you how they're allowed to take state funds and discriminate. That was one of my questions. And I've also contacted, this is more of a comment, Masters Academy 5 times, via Messenger, Facebook, email, very respectful, asking them how they're able to do that. Of course, they didn't answer me because they're not following up with their convictions, I guess. So how is, some of the language that they're using in this, for people who aren't aware, is that it's in line with perversion and bestiality. And when a student sees that, it's just a horrific thing what we're doing to kids, and staff members too. So how are they able to take state funds and also discriminate, and how are they able to discriminate?
Yes. So, I don't know the exact particulars of how these funds are doled out here in Florida, just because it's not my area of expertise. I will say that unless the state conditions the funds on non-discrimination, they could probably get away with it, unfortunately. And I don't know if the state has those sorts of protections in the funds they're doling out. I would assume they don't, based off of our government's protections for LGBTQ people in recent years. How can the school get away with discriminating? There are carve-outs for religious organizations under certain civil rights acts. And then there are also limited protections under certain civil rights acts. There are other states that have actually, extended their state-level civil rights laws to people on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. I would assume Florida is probably one that hasn't, but I'd have to check just to make sure. And then I guess there's one final concerning note, and that's recent precedent from the Supreme Court indicates that they are leaning towards giving a carve-out to religious organizations when it comes to discrimination against people in the LGBTQ community. They haven't fully done that yet, but they seem to be building to that. And so even if the state were to, in a couple of years, a more favorable government to LGBTQ people were to put limits on these funds, were to put an anti-discrimination limit on these funds, it's questionable if that would even be constitutional under the current Supreme Court's reading of the free exercise clause in the First Amendment. So Thus, right now, it probably is constitutional. In a few years, I don't know that it will be.
But they're protected under the religious liberties.
Yes.
Kicking out kids.
Unfortunately.
Well, what can we do?
When it comes to that, those specific schools, I mean, there's always the root of just trying to, convince them to do the right thing through public feedback. But I don't know if that'll make a difference. I'd say that just, obviously our public schools here, protecting our public schools. And if people wanted to get together and start a private school for children that didn't discriminate, that welcomed people of all different creeds and belief systems and race and sexual orientation, they could certainly do that too. Now, I know that's a big ask. It's not easy putting together a school, so.
Thanks very much. A wonderful talk. It seems to me you had 14 attorneys connected with the
11,
ACLU?
we're going to have 12 soon.
Okay, good. It seems like all of you could stand outside the governor's office and just wait for him to hand out what he dreamed up the night before and get a copy and be busy for that day. You mentioned a lot of the things that unbelievable, banning books, for example. One thing I can't understand is how far can the outreach go that the governor can pick on a school board member 40 counties away and throw them off, or an attorney general who's been elected? How can they get away with it? Or what's the deal?
Yes. A lot of hard questions today. So the governor has certain powers, and one of them is that he can remove people for cause. And so the question of whether or not the removal is proper generally comes down to a question under the Florida Constitution of whether there's sufficient cause. And so Andrew Warren, I think, is one of the people you were hinting at there. He's removed a lot of people of late, including school board members, the state attorney down in Tampa, who's a progressive prosecutor. With Andrew Warren, he did sue in federal court, and what the federal judge found is that the removal violated the First Amendment, but because of sovereign immunity, the federal judge himself could not reinstate him, and that he had to go to the state courts to get reinstatement. This is not something the federal courts could do. I think the struggle in the state courts is that, as I said before, we have 7 Florida Supreme Court justices, and 4 have been appointed by our current governor. And so there's a lot of fear that if you go to the state courts, you're not going to get a fair shake. And I do know that Andrew Warren has now filed in the state courts, pointing to the federal judge's opinion and said, hey, he already found a First Amendment violation here. Please reinstate me. We will see what happens in the state courts. The optimist in me hopes that the judges will show that they are above politics and will do the right thing. The cynic in me doesn't know that that'll happen. But that's really, he has a power under the Florida Constitution that allows him to remove people from cause, and I think personally that he is abusing that power. Personally, I think what he's doing is unconstitutional, but the Constitution only protects us so far as the courts are willing to recognize and enforce it, unfortunately. Or the people of the state are willing to recognize and enforce it by voting out the current leadership.
I wish we could go on, but thank you so much, Jerry. Wow. Okay, there is a great deal. Let us extinguish the chalice. I'm just going to blow it out, okay? If you'll read with me. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment, these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, Paula is going to sing If I Had a Hammer. Peter, Paul, and Mary, whom I saw twice in person.
Somebody took one of my pages. Wait a minute. Somebody took one of my cheat sheets.
Sabotage.
She would never do that to me. Never. Not on purpose.
Sing it loud.
Okay, and anybody who wants to can sing it with me. I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out the love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, oh, I've got a hammer and I've got a bell to ring, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land.
My closing words hopefully will help us to keep the good spirit going, the optimistic spirit going. These are from the words of Martin Luther King when in 1966 that he gave at the Ware lecture of our the UU General Assembly. I couldn't think of it for a second. And these are the his ending words. And we can sing, we shall overcome, because somehow we know that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We will overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant was right. Truth crushed will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet the scaffold always sways the future. And behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. With this faith we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. We will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood, and speed up that day when all of God's children, all over our nation and the world, will be able to walk the earth as brothers and sisters, and then we can sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. And our final postlude today is Ariata, which is by Edward Grieg, and it's Opus 12, number 1, done by our lovely Alicia. Did I say it correctly? Thank you. From UCF. Lovely, lovely. I just want to remind you that there is a SAC meeting, a Social Action Committee meeting after service this morning. Now you can get your coffee and talk about how we're going to fight. Oh, I'm sorry, there's also a UU 101 meeting. I believe that's in the library.